So let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to being in our Reenvisioning Education post-pandemic session. My name is Colin Rex Carter. I am a DCPS teacher. I teach pre-K4 at elementary, and I've been in the district now for 4 years.
Awesome. I'm Katrina Delaney. I am at Two Rivers Public Charter School, and I've been teaching in DC since 2013. Not good with math automatically, so I'm just going to say the year.
Hi, and I'm Ruth Scott. I also teach at Two Rivers PCS. This is my 4th year teaching in DC.
Okay. So really, the whole our whole objective today is obviously we know that virtual learning has not necessarily been the most ideal method of teaching, but I think we can all agree that there have been some great things that have come out, you know, just as far as virtual teaching this past year. And I think this this seminar is just meant as a way to think about the possibilities in light of what we've learned and the information that we have gleaned, you know, in the past year, switching to virtual learning, about what would we like to see in our district and in schools post-pandemic, just as far as some of the things that we have kind of taken that are actually good. How can we use some of those good things moving forward and make those necessary investments to enhance the learning post-pandemic? So this is really meant for you to be a time for you guys to reflect on what you think would be beneficial for us within the district to focus on, hopefully soon, as we're beginning to come out of the pandemic, and kind of reflect on what are the practices that teachers or what schools have been doing that you would like to see continue. So what we're going to do today, we're going to introduce to you a Jamboard. So essentially it's a virtual way of kind of collecting notes. So what we'll do is we'll kind of share the Jamboard with you, and then we'll kind of explain how to use it. It will make sense once we kind of explain it. And then essentially, you're going to take a walkthrough for about 20 minutes. There are a few topics that we have chosen that we think might be relevant to what you've seen or what you might have heard about in the media or in the work that EmpowerEd has done. And just take a few minutes to kind of look through each topic, and then any notes or any wonderings that you have to please share that note, and then we'll kind of share out together after 20 minutes and kind of talk through what you've noticed, things that you kind of are thinking about, and what ways that we kind of move forward. So essentially what we'd like you to do is the topics that we'd like you to consider include outdoor learning, digital and technology equity, charter teacher rights, family engagement, community mental health, student services and ELL, and then other or missed topics. So anything that we may not have mentioned here. So what we'd like you to do on each page, and we'll send you the link that you'll be able to access the Jamboard. Flip through the pages to learn more about these ideas. And then as you flip through, we ask you to add a sticky note to a learning block in each topic. And what we want you to consider as you, so thanks for sharing that. So what the questions that we want you to consider as you go through each topic is, what do you wonder about topic? What do you want to know more about? Do you have any experience in this topic? Where do you see this idea implemented or the need for implementation in DC? How much of a priority is this, should this be considered when re-envisioning the future of education in DC? So, so right now we'll give you about 20-25 minutes to go through the Jamboard, take a look at whatever topics that interest you or ones that you're really committed to, and then share your notes in the parking lot of each section, and we'll come back in 20 minutes. And also let us know if you're having any issues and we'll try our best to help you.
Or if you have questions or want more information on any of the topics, we can all give you some background information about some of the different issues and concerns we're seeing.
So thank you guys for, your thoughts, the last 20 minutes, just your exploration. So now we're just going to take the next 15 to 20 minutes just to kind of touch base together and just anything that might have stood out to you, something that you may not have thought of, or something that you have more wonderings about. This is meant to be an open dialogue. But I think really the biggest question is, I think obviously there have been a lot of good, systems that have been implemented in light of the pandemic. So I think the question, as educators, and I think people who are invested in education, one of the biggest questions is, where do we go from here? As far as, thinking post-pandemic when we will be in a new normal, obviously we have a feeling that our education needs to evolve in light of the new world that we're walking into. So what should our education look like in context of what we have learned and how we can implement some of these best practices moving forward? So feel free to share any thoughts or anything that stood out to you, as your heart desires. Take one break. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to say, we can also jump in with some of the topics and see what you guys have added and talked about. So maybe we want to start with outdoor learning, since that's kind of our first topic, and we'll move through and you guys can share out more based on what you read or saw. Colin, I believe outdoor learning is something you know more about. Do you kind of want to lead us through what's happening here?
Yeah, so basically the idea of outdoor learning kind of came about at a war-free meeting that I went to back in June. And as a pre-K teacher, a lot of our curriculum anyway stems from being outdoors. So all of this wasn't necessarily new for me personally, because part of our curriculum in pre-K is having the kids be outside. But I think the question that I wanted to kind of bring up is how to make our outdoor spaces more equitable for all kids and not just a select few. And I think obviously the idea of we are taking recess and using that for more academics, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but when children are having the opportunity, less opportunities to just play, but I think having less opportunities where they're able to connect with the outside world. And then not only that, losing opportunities where they're able to connect to their own city, I think there definitely is room where I think that should be a discussion. But I think the biggest question is, how can we ensure that all students are able to have places where they're not able just to play, but they're able to use these places to learn as well. And I think, I think it's a lot easier to maybe think about if you are an early childhood. But I think even in thinking in terms of elementary or even secondary ed, the idea that we live in DC and there's so much open space here that we can utilize, not just obviously, I think when you think of outdoor learning, you're thinking in terms of science primarily, but thinking in terms of how you can be able to use ELA or social studies or math in connection to the outdoors. Children need to kind of make these connections into things that are applicable for them. And I think that outdoor learning might be a way that we're able to bridge those barriers, especially in terms of thinking how we can make, I heard someone write like project-based, but I think even just that, how to make curriculum a lot more intersectional, just as far as the things that we're teaching our kids, how does this naturally apply in the real world? So, so I think, there's a lot of potential here, but I think the biggest question that we should ask is how can we ensure that all students in DC have access to these spaces where they're able to playfully safe and learn. And if their school is not necessarily safe, what can we do or what investments can be made so that we can create those safe havens for our students?
I see someone asked about inclement weather and cold situations. Does anyone have any information about how other districts or how DC might be able to handle that with outdoor classrooms?
I think, for me, having kind of doing this at my school, I think it just depends on my school, on the school. I think though, like as long as in my mind, again, as long as it's not totally cold, it's not freezing, then, or if the weather is not so bad that children can still manage. Even like for me teaching 4 and 5-year-olds, like if it's a drizzle, we'll still go outside. So I think it's just the idea of learning how to play in the elements. But I think if children have that investment, they'll be willing to go out regardless of, at least in my experience, they're willing to go out and explore in the elements as well. So obviously, again, I think it depends on the comfort of the teacher. Obviously, it depends on the comfort of the school, but I think that there can be some leeway there. But I think definitely as far as thinking in terms of, thinking about in the fall or definitely in the spring, I think those are times when we can be able to capitalize on that. And in fact, I know, just as far as, in DCPS, there are about 30 schools right now that are interested in doing outdoor learning in term 4, especially given vaccinations. Teachers have not necessarily felt comfortable being indoors, but they feel more comfortable coming back if they're able to work outdoors. So I think there's something to that. And I think there should be something that we should take more advantage of, I think, especially in the warm months, where you can make that argument that you can extend a class or even like aspects of curriculum to outdoor spaces.
And I think there's also opportunities for, overhangs, things that cover from the rain, there could be investments made there to, even if it is downpouring, you could still have an outdoor class, if it's not too cold. So I think there are some ways that we could be creative with setting up these outdoor spaces, but it will just take some investments.
Has anybody seen people thinking about supporting kids who don't have the proper attire?
Mm-hmm.
So like, I know that each year we give coats to schools through like our War 7 Dems and things. So like there are kids, like there might not be technically any weather condition could be, you could be outside as long as you're dressed appropriately.
Right.
But we can't guarantee that every kid is going to show up with a coat or socks or, hats and gloves and scarves. And even like spring can be tricky. I will acknowledge that as a summer baby, I don't really like spring very much because it's not actually warm yet.
Right.
So like, what have there been any shining examples of not just like infrastructure support as far as like hangovers and things like that, but actually supporting kids who might not be showing up with everything they would need to be comfortable outside?
Right. I think that goes to a larger question just as far as equity. And I think, and I think that's where partnerships with different organizations, who are able to provide clothing, warm clothing for students who may not necessarily have the right gear. I think those investments should be made anyway. But I think in a lot of ways that might be easier to kind of have families and schools to kind of think about in terms if we're able to provide that for families who need it versus maybe like an overhang or a outside tent. But I think that should be a part of the larger discussion too, as far as making sure that essentially our students, our children are being taken care of in all aspects of the year, not just obviously in the warm months, but obviously in the winter months when they may not necessarily have that gear. And it can be expensive depending, on what you need. But I think that also too should be a part of that discussion as far as partnerships or different organizations are able to help students with those needs.
Any other shares? I know there's some questions in the chat. We're trying to get all these questions and ideas so that we can use them going later. Any other for outdoor learning? Or I'm going to keep rolling to digital equity.
Can I make a suggestion?
Absolutely.
My suggestion, I jokingly said this to a parent at a store, and when I said it, I was like, I would gladly go. It was in the summer when I made this statement. It was like the end of July. It was right after my son's 5th birthday. And I said, I would gladly go back to out to work. She was complaining because she was complaining about her son's teacher. And I felt a little offended because I was wrangling my 5- and 2-year-old trying to check out at this store. And I told her, I said flat out, I said, I'm a teacher and I'm a mother. And I have to figure out how I'm going to teach in-person learning because I might have to go back. She said, so you need to stop being lazy and do your job. I said, ma'am, I want to do my job and I want to be able to do it outside in a safe space. I want to be able to offer outdoor opportunities to kids in my neighborhood. She's like, oh, you live in the hood. I sure do. And I want to be able, I said, why can't I, just how Black Lives Matter Plaza is protected by the mayor and protected by local MPD, why can't we take that same spirit and protect outdoor learning spaces east of the river? How about we take empty shipping containers that are essentially bulletproof? Let's be real, shootings happen out in outdoor spaces and outside in Ward 7 and 8 east of the river, and turn those into mobile classrooms and bring them to the communities that are most disadvantaged. How about we take this time, just the way the DC government has funded streetery programs for small businesses and restaurants and other upper echelon wards that have more disposable income, you could take that same spirit of Black Lives Matter and Education Matters now and put it into outdoor learning spaces east of the river and protect them with that same spirit.
Right. And Patricia, I'll just add to that. When I lived in Eckington up until this past summer, there was a park that was built just right across my apartment complex. And last summer, there were a lot of families that had parties there. So obviously the cops were there just to monitor, for, the parties going on, which was perfectly fine. So I think in light, just to add on to that, if we're able to do that, for a festive occasion, why can we not do the same thing as far as learning opportunities for our students? So I think there is that potential there, but I think it's just a matter of, prioritizing, our needs. And I think especially for neighborhoods east of the river where there is that issue of safety, can it be that, that those families and those communities can get that support if that was something that we want to consider for our students east of the river as well.
Thank you, Colin.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks. I'm gonna, because we're a little short on time, but I do want to get to digital equity. I know a lot of people have thoughts. please keep using the chat for ideas. Shout out things if we don't get to a page you want to talk about. The digital equity, I want to give a big shout out to, and this had been mislabeled on the first thing, but the Digital Equity in DC Education. It's a citywide coalition for parents, and they have really taken the lead this year on bringing up digital equity issues and really being at the forefront with bringing things up to the mayor's office, to the State Board of Education, and different policy groups. So for those of you looking to get more involved with that, I highly recommend this group. Grace Hugh is here, who leads the group. But digital equity, things you guys need, notice, or experiences this year.
As a parent and as an educator, I realize my colleagues are now more digital savvy. They could check their email, do timesheets. Everyone is on it. I've seen parents, dads, definitely dads. I got to shout out my dads online figuring it out. I've watched parents that did not know anything about Zoom last March and April. Now can, Scott said it's almost 2 minutes left. They now have more computer savvy, and it's all because we were forced to do it. So to me, the digital divide has closed a bit because you have exposed so many kids, aunties, uncles, regular DC residents to things that they need. You gave them the tech and now they're using it and figuring it out. Imagine that. Imagine if we had free internet, free utility. Imagine what we can learn with that.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, one of the big pushes has been high-speed internet for all. And one of the things the mayor's office put in place was the Internet for All initiative. But the thing about it is they are using the lowest tier internet services for the providers through it. And the tiers of those services, the upload download speeds are not high enough at their best to support things like Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, while also running other internet services. And kids are working hard, parents are working hard. We need the internet to work hard for them as well.
I think one thing that I've seen is just the tech support needs, not being able to meet the needs of all students. And so what do we need to do expanding our tech supports at individual schools at the district level so that teachers and parents aren't picking up the slack when there aren't supports available to them. So that's my piece.
Yeah, very quickly, I think this in connection with family engagement, I think is also huge because we've been able to basically open up the world as far as having families who may not have been able to attend a conference being able to, families who may not have been able to go to a webinar due to, oh, I have to work late. We can tape it for them and then they can watch it at their own time. Family members who live outside of the US are able to kind of call in and read a story to their grandchildren. So I think if anything, this should be a huge thing moving forward that we need to capitalize on, especially with the idea that the tech is not going to go away. And we have just kind of just begun to open the doors as far as the potential of what we're able to do, as far as being able to make the enhancements to our curriculum. So I think we definitely need to make that investment moving forward as far as, I think, making sure that tech is equitable, but I think the tech is applicable and as far as speeds up to par of what we need so that students have full access without slow tech or slow internet connections.
Excellent, thanks. We're about out of time. If there's anything you guys want to shout out about these pages, we're going to go through and synthesize all the information for making some decisions and send out. We'd love to hear more from you, or if any of you want to jump in with Empower Ed,